Okay, seeing that we have a quorum available, I will call to order the Peninsula RTPO Executive Board meeting for October 15th. And as we typically do, because this is recorded and available to the public, I go through and introduce everyone as I see them on my screen. So when I say your name, you can raise your hand and then the public will know who you are and who you represent. And if I miss someone, I apologize. Looking across my screen, the first person I see is Ed Coviello. He is with Kitsap Transit and is one of the administrators for the RPTO. I am Beck Ashby. I am a city council person with the city of Port Orchard, and I am chairing the RPTO this year. Sarah Crouch is with Jefferson Transit, and Jefferson Transit is our lead physical agent. Ted Jackson is with the Port of Allen. Michael Bateman is with the Public Works Transportation Division of the City of Port Orchard. Tracy, I apologize. I'm not familiar with her last name, but she is with the Squaxin tribe.
I'm City of Paulsbo, Beck, by the way.
Oh, well, who did I say?
You said Port Orchard, but that's okay.
Oh, well, we'll take you. We could use someone. We'll take you. Gary Anderson is a commissioner with the Port of Bremerton. Steve Gray is with Clallam County's Public Works Department. John Clausen is Executive Director of Kitsap Transit, our lead planning agency. And Dina Geisler, you are with one of the transportation providers, and I'm sorry, I don't know which one.
OLICAP.
OLICAP, thank you. And then we have Sarah Black, who is the RPTO coordinator. Amy Asher is with Mason Transit, and she's fairly new in her job, but last couple of months. Deidre Peterson is a city council person with the city of Shelton. Wendy Clark Getson is now with the Jamestown Sklallam tribe. And then we have Mr. Trouble himself, Dennis Engel, with the Washington State Department of Transportation, Olympic region. David Fort is with Kitsap County's Public Works Department. And Lindsay Schwarm Warren is a city council person with the city of Port Angeles. Tammy Rupert is the executive director of Jefferson Transit. Randy Netherland is the birthday boy, and he is a commissioner with Mason County and happens to be celebrating his birthday in Hawaii, and he got up early to join us this morning. Brendan Meyer is representing, he's on the, I believe, City Council of Port Angeles, but he's here representing Clallam Transit. And people keep jumping all over my screen. I see Ed Stern joined us, and Ed is a city council person with the city of Paulsbo.
Apologies, Beck, for being late, but we just came out of a planning meeting for Western Washington University on the peninsulas, which of us here, and trying to move things in a real positive fashion with the COVID impacted enrollment. So good excuse for PRTPO, I think. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If there's anyone I missed because pictures did jump around on me a little bit, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing none, we will move on down to approval of the agenda. Would someone like to move approval of the agenda?
Madam Chair, I move approval of agenda as presented.
Thank you, Randy. Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Is there anyone who would be wanting to vote against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would like to vote against having the agenda approved? Hearing none, the agenda is approved with unanimous consent. We will move down to our consent items, which include the minutes from our meeting in August, an agreement with Kitsap Transit for their lead planning agency services, an agreement with Jefferson Transit for the physical agent services, and the approval of our UPWP development policy. Did anyone want any of those items moved to a business item? Seeing none, I would be happy to entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So
Ed,
moved.
did you want, oh, John, are you going to approve it? Or
So moved. David.
David, thank you, David. Is there someone who would second the approval of the consent agenda?
This is Kate Dean on the phone.
Okay, who's on the phone?
This is Kate Dean from Jefferson County. Sorry, I was a little late.
Okay, thank you, Kate. There has been a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would be wishing to vote against that motion? Again, I will ask, is there anyone who would prefer to vote against the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved with unanimous consent. Going down to our first action item, and this is an agreement between the RPTO and Kitsap Transit for the Human Services Transportation Grant Administration. I will give everyone a little bit of background on this and then let Thera talk about documentation that was sent out yesterday. We gave you a report in, well, it was as early as June when we approved our UPWP. We had funding in there for the human development of the human services plan, or update of that. At that time, we thought it was state dollars, and then we found out later it was federal dollars. And it's very difficult for the RPTO to deal with federal dollars. So at that point, and what we brought to your attention in August is we were working for a solution with the Public Transportation Department of DOT. We did have that meeting, and I will say that the Public Transportation Department was very cooperative and helped us find a solution, which was made possible by Kitsap Transit's agreement to handle the reporting requirements and the administration of the funds, because the RPTO just doesn't have the bandwidth to do that. And the Public Transportation Department was pleased to be able to work with us for that solution. So before you today is a resolution. And what we did at that point is I sent a letter, I authored a letter to the Department of Transportation assigning those federal grant funds to Kitsap Transit. And what you have before you today is a resolution to have Kitsap Transit administer the funds and for the RPTO to actually create update the human services plan. So with that, Thera, that's the background information I have. Thera, would you like to add to that?
I think you cover it pretty well. It should be apparent to you as you look through this, what that agreement entails, and what we specified in the update that came back out, which I think is a better reflection of the arrangement, is PRTPO is responsible for delivering the work, and Kitsap Transit is going to handle the administration. So what you see attached to this agreement is the scope of work developed with Kitsap Transit for delivering the Human Services Transportation Plan update. So, if you have any questions or discussion about that, we will be bringing that back to you in more detail at your next meeting. This is just to go ahead and create that agreement with Kitsap Transit. Our understanding is that if we can deliver the plan for less money than what they have awarded PRTPO. The funding has a 4-year life. And so we can use that, any remaining funding to advance some of the objectives that might come out of that plan update. So to try to establish a little bit more of an ongoing relationship with the human services transportation providers. So we don't speak to that in here. First thing up is to deal with the plan update, but if we are, if we can deliver this well, we'll be coming back to you in a little over a year or so, maybe to talk about what additional work. The schedule itself for the plan update is pretty ambitious, so we're really grateful that Kitsap Transit was willing to step into this role and allow us to start proceeding with this work so that we can have products to you in a timely basis so that we can meet our deadlines with WashDOT. Happy to answer any questions that you might have about that scope of work or what I can about the arrangement.
Okay, John?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure with using the unanimous consent, it makes it a little bit challenging, but I'm going to abstain from voting, and I would like the record to show that I abstained from the others simply because it involves Kitsap Transit, and I just don't think it's appropriate for me to be voting on something that talks about work for Kitsap Transit. So that's it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, he may be correct. This may not be the right place for a
Unanimous consent, exactly.
Yeah. I'd be willing to make a motion if we need if you want to pull it.
Okay, the other thing that I want to make sure the board understands is that it is the practice of the RPTO to bring a discussion item before you in one meeting so that we can do our due diligence on an action item and bring the action item before you at the second meeting. We're actually providing you the documentation and asking you for an action in one step rather than 2 steps. So I just want to be clear that I believe with the conversations we had in June and August, this is not a surprise to anyone, and that we provided the documentation to you in adequate time for review before a vote.
Beth, knowing everything that you've done to get us where we are, let me just say I very much appreciate it. And with the timing and the way you've gotten out the information, I think you've done a wonderful job of doing it. I'm very comfortable with voting on it.
Okay, with that, we will entertain a motion to approve, and our vote will be, rather than a roll call vote, I think we'll do a voice vote. But when we have the Open Public Meetings Act, the public has a right to see you vote. So I would like you to vote and raise your hand so that rather than just saying aye, you also give us a visual so that people can see how you have voted. And I will remind everyone who does vote is obviously the voting membership. And our guest today, Dana, would not be eligible to vote. So with that, I would be glad to entertain a motion to approve the resolution 08-2021 adopting adopting the agreement with Kitsap Transit to administer the HSTP funds.
Madam Chair, I move for approval of resolution 08-201 approving the and the movement of the Kitsap Transit Fund.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second. Kate Dean.
Thank you, Kate.
Can I clarify that was 07-2021 is this resolution?
Thank you. Right. I was looking at the wrong one. It is 07.
Madam Chair, I change it to the approval of 07-201.
And that is fine with the second.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Is there any discussion on the motion? Lindsay, I saw that you put a little check up. Is there a way for us to do that so we don't all have to raise our hands?
It was in my reactions. So, you've got the thumbs up and the applause. That check was in there too. The one catch is it seems to stick around. and so it doesn't automatically disappear. But it also might be different folks, depending on your operating system and which version of Zoom you're using, you might have it or might not, but the thumb up also works.
Okay, with that, when we do the vote, if you want to use your raise your hand or the green check for your vote, or wildly wave, that would be acceptable too. So we have a motion on the floor with a second to approve resolution 07-2021, approving the agreement for the administration of HSTP funds by Kitsap Transit. All those in favor, please signify visually. Okay, and is there anyone opposed? So everyone who's said yes, take your little marks down. And anyone who's going to say no, put your little marks up. Okay, Michael Bateman, are you voting against it? No, okay. You're just trying to figure out how. Okay, Tammy, I'm assuming that you didn't take yours down too. Is that correct? Or are you voting?
I took it down and it's not, there it
it's not going away.
There you go. It's down.
Well, that experiment didn't go real well, but I think that we had a positive vote and the resolution passed. And please note in the minutes that Kitsap Transit is abstained from voting. Okay, with that, we'll move down to our next agenda item, which is in fact approval of our regional transportation improvement plan. So we will direct this directly to Ed Coviello.
Oh, good morning, PRTPO. Attached is the 2022 to 2027 regional tip. Every year we bring this to the PRTPO, and then we also entertain amendments as members request throughout the year. There's 154 projects in this year's regional transportation improvement program. 72 of those 154 have funding that is secured and ready to roll over into the statewide transportation improvement program. And then as soon as December, I'll be coming back to you with at least one more project to add as an amendment. So I'll be back with you in December to make that number go up by probably 2 projects. And we're also still working on the mapping. We've received some coordinates from most of the project members so that way I can hopefully have a map up here pretty soon on our website, an interactive map. But in the meantime, we need to get this done today so I can begin as soon as this meeting is over, sending the individual projects over to the local programs office of the Washington DOT to begin the process of getting them into the STIP so that money can become obligated and projects can move forward. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Ed. Are there any questions or is there a motion?
Actually, I have my own question.
Okay.
We did receive one semi-public comment. It was actually from Nancy Huntley at local program. She went through and suggested corrections with some of the projects, and I worked with the members and the project sponsors to make those corrections happen. But that's all I received from the public comment. And the TAC also approved to bring this to you today as well at their September board meeting.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the RTIP and then we can have a discussion on it? Don't all speak at once. David, would you like to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, David. Is there a second, Wendy? Okay, I believe Wendy was muted, but I believe that she seconded.
Yes, a second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on our regional transportation improvement plan as made available to all of you? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the vote. It has been moved and seconded to adopt resolution. This is the one that 2021 adopting the 2022 to 2027 Regional Transportation Improvement Plan for the Peninsula region. And again, I will remind the group that this is for Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason County. Kitsap's project are registered through PSRC, the Puget Sound Regional Coordinating Council. Is there any discussion? Okay, we will take the vote. Is there anyone who would be wanting to vote against approving the motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes with unanimous consent. Thank you. Moving on down our agenda, we're just clipping right along here this morning. Moving down our agenda, we have some updated information and a first reading for our EV readiness portion of our UPWP. Farah, I will let you lead this discussion. Thank you.
Great, thank you. This is regarding your work program for the biennium that was adopted by PRTPO back in June. And I'm coming to you to talk about a proposed work program activity to specify in that UPWP. Just again, by way of quick reminder, the UPWP is your adopted budget and work program. And what we included in the UPWP this go around is sort of a placeholder, which back when we drafted this in April, May, we weren't quite sure what that would look like, but we had a placeholder in there for RTP follow-up activities, RTP being the Regional Transportation Plan. And for those who weren't here a couple of years ago, when the RTP was adopted through that public comment process, we received comments that the plan was sort of, I'm going to say, lacking, or wasn't articulate enough about a couple of things in particular. One of them was sort of our climate readiness. How do we respond to climate change, minimize impacts on the environment, reduce greenhouse gas emissions? That was one of the sort of big comment threads that came out of it. And another one was resilience, that the region needed to do some more to increase its regional resilience. So those were the sort of the two follow-up activities that came out of that we've looked at to how can we support those with our work program. And you might recall that late this past spring, we used a little tiny bit of money out of the budget, out of our last fiscal year budget, to hire DKS, or specifically Mike Usen with DKS, to help us start pursuing some electric vehicle readiness activities. How can PRTPO, in what it does, help the region to be more ready for electric vehicles as they start coming online? We created an inventory. Hopefully some of you have been out to the website to see it, an inventory of resources for our local partners. We polled our local partners to try to understand better where they are, each of you in your own processes. Where are you in terms of electric vehicle readiness, whether it's public fleets or public use charging stations, and then what kind of information would be helpful to you. So that was what we did in the spring quarter, that last quarter of the fiscal year. And the takeaway for us was that there is an ongoing role for PRTPO, despite the fact that we don't have a giant budget, you don't have full-time staff, anything like that, but that there are things that can be done. And so what we did is we looked at the set aside, this earmark that we had in the UPWP, and we said, well, we can certainly within that allocate about at least, let's start off, let's call it 40 hours. And that's what this proposes, 40 hours of activities that we will conduct, Ed and me, probably mostly me, to conduct to support the increased EV readiness. And what I lay out in here are activities that are, I think your discussion will help me know if I'm right or not, but that I think are very consistent with the mission and the roles and responsibilities of PRTPO. So as they're laid out there, one of those is to continue maintaining communications with an EV infrastructure coordinating group that formed as the result of the work that we did late in state fiscal year 2021. So right now we've got about 45, 48 interest on that. Anybody on this meeting who is not on that list and wants to be, I'd be happy to add you. What's really interesting, we have a lot of folks from your agencies that are not typical transportation, like maybe don't participate on the TAC because of how EV infrastructure is handled independently. So we have some member representatives who are different than those that we work with on a regular basis, but we also have a lot of stakeholders that are not members of PRTPO. We have PUDs, we have telecom, we have consultants for some other tribes that are not actively involved with us, just climate action groups. There are a variety of different organizations who are not involved with PRTPO who are very interested and involved in electric vehicle infrastructure. So they're a part of this coordinating group. So this would propose that we continue maintaining that coordinating group and pushing information out to them as appropriate. It also proposes, this work program would propose that PRTPO continue to maintain awareness of funding opportunities and push that information out to our members. And through this coordinating group, there is a lot of money at the state level that's about to be made available for electric vehicle infrastructure, or I should even just say zero emissions vehicles. So it's hydrogen, traditional battery electric vehicles. It's very broad, but if we can, and then there's money coming down from the feds too. So that seems like a logical thing that we can continue to do that would support our members. Also on that list is to maintain this information portal that we created on the website. And our goal with that is to be responsive to our members and these stakeholders who are involved in this, be responsive to their changing needs. So right now, a lot of them are looking for information on startup activities. So we have a lot of that out there, but we're increasingly being asked, or what I'm increasingly hearing is that people don't understand how the private part of this works, how the charging companies part of this works. So we're keeping our ear to the ground, and we'll talk about that in a second, about how to provide more information to our partners on how to engage with charging companies or other entities that are involved from the private sector side of making this infrastructure come together. And finally, there would be coordination meetings that are sort of related to all of this, and we actually have a specific one in mind that is being scheduled right now. And finally, the last thing on this work program proposal is to pay attention to the state's own planning efforts. They maintain, WashDOT maintains a state electric vehicle action plan. The current plan is at the end, it's expired now. So they will be updating that soon. There's nothing in the current plan about the peninsula region. And we want to make sure that in the next plan update, that it recognizes the needs of rural communities on the peninsula region and their electric vehicle infrastructure needs. So that's what we would propose to you. We're proposing about 40 hours of time to do that. And to, as things evolve, we can come back and talk to you. It also saves there's maybe about $10,000 of unallocated budget within the RTP follow-up activities that we will come back to you as this year advances with other ideas about good ways to invest it. But this seemed like a very logical, no-brainer next step to propose to you to take. And so that's the work program that's proposed. We'll come back to you in December for your approval. Between now and December, though, we are moving ahead with scheduling. We have scheduled one of those periodic coordination meetings with the stakeholder group. And that is on October 26th. And I'll talk about it maybe a little bit more later, unless you want to talk about it now. But what that will do is we are bringing Rivian and ChargePoint, representatives from Rivian and ChargePoint, and I may be able to get a third one there. These are the private sector companies, bringing them to the table to just talk about how they decide how to get involved. Our partners, would like to ask questions about when to engage them, what resources can they bring to the table if you're putting together a competitive grant proposal, when and where and how do you engage with the private sector folks. So this is a chance for them to sort of explain what the world looks like from their side of things, and then to field any questions and brainstorm ideas with stakeholders. So it was a really unique opportunity. There's a large grant that's related to this that we expect to drop in November or early December. And so we thought that this was a great opportunity, again, consistent with this, to take advantage of that, bring people together, and hopefully help them be more successful in any grant applications that they would submit going forward on this. So with that, I think I'll stop, answer any questions that you might have. Again, this will come back to you in December for action. And yeah.
Correct. What we're asking today is we're just giving you a briefing of what we anticipate this portion of the work program would look like. And we will ask for your blessing on that in December. However, in the meantime, we do have one of these forums scheduled for October 26th. Kate?
Thank you. Sarah, I'm really excited to see this moving forward, and it dovetails with some priorities and efforts in Jefferson County. You alluded to it a little bit in your last couple sentences there, but just want to ensure that, that this effort does not compete with in any way, and that it adds value to other local efforts happening. So I imagine that is the perspective you are bringing to this, but just want to be sure that this is to support efforts. We're struggling locally because we're not kind of sure who should own this project, and we even have some potential funding to do additional planning work. But even just at a county level, we're trying to figure out who should own it and advance it. And I know that the PRTPO is not in a position to own and advance the regional effort either. So just ask that a lot of thought is given to adding value to other efforts in a collaborative way.
And I appreciate you bringing that up, Kate. And one of the things, as somebody who's worked with a lot of transportation grants for a long time, when I look at this ZVIP grant, this Zero Emissions Vehicle Infrastructure Partnerships grant program that's about to drop, and I look at the kind of projects that they want to fund, I scratch my head wondering, like, what kind of an entity could actually manage a project such as that. So I'm actually putting some feelers out. I think a very long shot is, could WashDOT Olympic Region do it, because it is the one entity that encompasses in all of the Olympic and Kitsap peninsulas, as well as Grays Harbor County, because if you're going to complete the 101 corridor, we even have that. And next week, I'm meeting with folks from Grays Harbor Council of Governments to talk about how they've thought about this in the past, just to get smart about this. And they say this is a real challenge. I've also put out feelers to Energy Northwest. They have assembled a similar sort of a project for the Highway 97 corridor up through the Okanagan and down into Chelan and Douglas counties. And so I've reached out to them too, just to try to understand what the mechanisms are, because like you said, it's hard enough to figure out who owns it within a county. And then if you're talking about multiple counties, multiple types of government, public sector, private sector, I don't have any experience with it. And PRTPO is not looking to, we are not in a position, PRTPO is not, you are not in a position as PRTPO to lead a project, to administer a project, anything like that. So our goal is really to hear from you, your constituents, your stakeholders, anybody who will share their information with us, talked with us, to understand who's doing what, so we can help make connections and fill in the gaps, so everybody moves ahead with our tiny resources. Where can we best apply them? So any ideas that you have along those lines, I'm all ears all the time. So follow up with me anytime.
Can I ask a follow-up, Chair Ashby? Thank you. I'm curious if, if indeed there were a successful grant application for the program you're discussing, and could you see the PRTPO adding capacity to make that, if indeed is it possible for this project to live under PTO with the added capacity that a large grant might bring?
It would be very difficult under the structure that our organizational structure. It would be extremely. It would not a natural fit. Yeah.
Yeah, for a number of reasons, which we can discuss offline, but we were very fortunate with the federal money we received for our human services plan. The Kitsap Transit was willing to do the administration on that. We're just not geared to do that. And the other thing, for those of you who may or may not know this, there are no dues to belong to this volunteer organization, which the RPTO is. All of our funding comes from the state, and it's very limited. So we're trying to maximize use of those dollars. And in this effort, it's coordinating information for people or for entities. Okay, is there any more discussion on the EV readiness program, which we will bring back for action in December?
I got a question.
Thanks, Gary. Go ahead.
Are you going to send out an invite for the October 26th meeting on that?
I will. I've sent it. What I can do is after this meeting, I'll send it out to all of you as board members. I have sent it out to all of the people that I know of right now who are interested in the EV infrastructure, ongoing EV infrastructure coordination, but I will send it out to you. And as elected officials, a lot of you, you may have staff who are working on this. Feel free to forward it on to them. Word is getting, word of mouth is sort of how this is spreading out. So take a look internally and see if somebody should be dialing into this who might not know about PRTPO or have heard about it some other way. But I'll do that as a follow-up, Gary. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Okay, Wendy?
I have one last question on this EV process. Will we know within the work group what projects WSDOT is looking at to develop themselves so that we can coordinate and actually plan together how the EV projects can continue as this grant drops? We might be able to partner with them.
Well, WSDOT is a part of the group. And so they are at the table. And then actually, I pinged Dennis just recently just to say, how is there other planning going on? Can we tap in? And so yeah, we have ongoing lines of coordination and communication, but within Olympic Region itself, there's not like a big initiative to go do this that we're then trying to dovetail with. We're looking for those partnership opportunities. We're looking for them, and again, not competing, looking to partner as much as possible. But there's not a big coordinated EV planning effort within Olympic Region, that we're trying to integrate with. And Dennis, if I misrepresented that, let me know. But that's my understanding, is that they're at the table and they're interested, but they don't have their own big initiative going right now.
Thank you.
With that, I think we'll move on to our next agenda item, because it may also give us a bit of a discussion, and we want to make sure we have time for the presentation on the Decabush restoration. And this our next agenda item is approving our transportation outlook, which is the paper that we give to our legislators. And I know Thera is probably going to review this. What I would like to say up front before she gets into this is some action items we want out of this is we want to make sure that we're trying to schedule a date that meets with our board's availability. And I am also going to be asking for volunteers for our members who would like to be part of the presentation that we give to our legislators. We had volunteers last year giving testimony on items that were very important to their particular jurisdiction, examples of what we were highlighting in our outlook. And so at the end of this, we will also be asking for volunteers that would be happy to be part of presenting at our legislative session. So Thera, I will go ahead and turn it over to you, and then we will seek approval on this document.
Thanks. I think the piece itself is fairly self-explanatory, and you all reviewed this in August. So, if there are any final revisions or tweaks to the language, and we've talked about it's taken a stronger voice this year and sort of being more assertive. And we've tested that with members who participated on the legislative work group and with the executive committee, just to say, are you really comfortable with this? And everybody's comfortable with the sort of making a strong assertive statement up front about what's important. The infographic didn't change at all from last year for a variety of reasons, partly data, partly time, partly budget value of it. The project list is the thing that you did not see in August, and that was developed over September with input from local agencies. And so if there are any questions about that, I think most of the project proponents are here on this call and they could answer that. In terms of the forum date that Beck referred to, the forum, and as we said before, this year instead of scheduling 3 forums, we're scheduling 1, trying to, as best as we can, schedule around the availability of our 4 legislators who sit on either the House or the Senate Transportation Committees. They're the ones who actually participated last year, the only ones who participated last year. So it seems logical that that's who we would really target in our efforts this year. The date that we are looking at with them is November 18th. It's a Thursday. It's the Thursday before Thanksgiving. And the time that we have floated with them is, to see if this will work, is 5:30 to 7 in the evening. I have already heard back that so far the date's not bad, but there are committee meetings being scheduled. And so we're trying to find a window that doesn't conflict with those committee meetings, because we ran into that problem last year. And so I hope to hear back from them by early next week, as soon as we can confirm it. But that's tentatively what we're looking at. That night does not conflict with any of our board members' meeting schedules. It's kind of tricky to find, with 27 members, find an evening that doesn't conflict with anybody's meeting schedules. But Thursdays are pretty safe, and the 18th is not a holiday and doesn't conflict with anybody's schedule. So you might pencil that in. As soon as I can confirm that, I will get that out to you. But otherwise, I would just turn it over to you for any final revisions you'd want to see made. Otherwise, we'll zip this up after today's meeting and get it ready to distribute and post online and start working on the presentation. And as Beck said, she wants some volunteers to help with that.
Is there any discussion on the document itself or the contents of the document? Have we hit the right points? Ed, that's a thumbs up for the document? Okay. Kate?
Yeah, I think it's great. I see that you incorporated a lot of feedback from our last meeting. Thank you. It's well done. I worry a little bit about the resilience point, even while I think that's really important. It's way less specific than some of the others. And if we were trying to kind of pare down and find full readability, which we hear from the legislature all the time, is trying to keep it as concise as possible. I think that one is perhaps more optional. I will say the for for local governments in Jefferson County have a public meeting the night of the 18th at pretty much the exact same time, which is, I'm sorry if I didn't catch that in an email, but City of Port Townsend and Jefferson County couldn't participate. The other two partners aren't a member of this group, but that is unfortunate because that is the entire councils of all four local governments. So we won't be able to participate, which I regret.
Try to find a different.
Yeah, that's problematic. We would
We'll
not
go back to the
necessarily
drawing.
to eliminate, one entire county from this process. So we'll see if we can find something else. My other concern or question I have to our board, I'm assuming, right or wrong, that we wanted an evening because many of us on the board have day jobs, and adding this would be an evening event, not a daytime event. But I may be wrong in that. Any comments? Okay, what we may have to do is, Kate, go ahead again.
I'm also realizing that is also during the county's conference, and I'm not sure, Randy, or that it generally includes all county commissioners as well as affiliate groups, so administrators and public works. So just, I'm not sure if others are making that connection too, if they plan on participating. That's a summer in Spokane, and then there's a big virtual component too.
Okay, Kate, you just reminded me, because our Kitsap jurisdictions are also involved with Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, and we have moved our legislative forum till sometime in December. And normally we would have had it on this November 11th, but that's Veterans Day. And then I knew there was a reason why KRCC couldn't do it this next week. And then the next week was Thanksgiving. So they were pushing out till December. So that answers that question. We can't have something with none of our counties able to attend.
So that does, I know that we try to keep it early, but I think we have to push into November. I just don't.
Into December, yeah. We will, let's leave it with this with the group, is we will reach out to our legislators and perhaps put out a doodle poll to this group. Again, Thursday seems to be the night because many of our council members or commissioners have meetings on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings. So we will go back to square one on the date. That's what I'm trying to say. But is there anyone, Lindsay Shoreham-Warren, who wants to volunteer to be part of the presentation?
Yes, I will.
I thought you did such a great job last time. So he's the one that participated last time, so I wasn't afraid to call on him. And if you're not raising your hands today, please expect a call from me because I am not bashful.
Is that Brendan?
Oh, Brendan, are you raising your hand too? Or are you clapping that Lindsay raised his?
Sorry, yes, I was just clapping and then I got put onto another screen. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Kate, did you not take your hand down or did you have more to say?
I'm just going to say I'm happy to present also if the
thank you.
date works out and if there's need.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, we will move on to, I think we need action. We need a motion to approve our, what do we call it? Our legislative folio. The motion would be something like move to approve the final draft version of the Transportation Outlook 2022 legislative folio for distribution to the RPTO legislators and other stakeholders.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So
I thought so, John. Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to second that?
I'll second it. This is Tammy.
Thanks, Tammy. Is there any more discussion on the legislative outlook? Okay. Do you mind if we do this with unanimous consent? Is there anyone who would be voting? We have a motion on the floor with a second to approve the final version of the transportation outlook for 2022. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Is there anyone who would want to vote against that motion? I'm asking for the second time. Seeing none, the motion passes with unanimous consent. So with that, I believe we're down to our presentation. And look at there, we got us back on time.
You're amazing, Beck. Hey, I'd like to, yeah.
Would you please introduce our guest?
I will, thank you.
Thank
I'd like to introduce Teresa Mitchell with she's an environmental planner with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And Teresa contacted me back in July looking for a concurrence from PRTPO that a project was consistent with our long-range plan. And so we did our due diligence, found out more about it, and it's absolutely consistent with the long-range plan. And it was just so fascinating that we thought it would be really great for you all to have a presentation on this as well. And we submitted a letter of support. Fingers crossed that maybe some notice came out in the middle of the night last night that I didn't hear about, but hopefully they get funding. And but we wanted to bring this to you. You might have actually just seen it. It showed up in the Port Townsend Leader. This is showing up on the radar around. So thank you, Teresa, for making the time to meet with us today, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Great. Can you guys hear me okay? Thumbs up, nodding, something. Yes. And you can see my screen. Yes. Are we good there too? Okay. 2 good things happened already today then. Thanks again for having me here. I am Teresa Mitchell with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I also have Seth Ballhorn on the call. He's my external affairs coordinator, and he's going to be here to answer questions as well. I'm going to go through about 30 slides, lickety split fast to leave time for conversation. So I would ask that you hold questions till the end or put them in the chat even. That might be an easy way to keep track of them. My partner at the Washington State Department of Transportation Olympic Region is Bill Elliott. He was unable to come today, but he did share, allow me to share his slides with you all. I won't be able to answer specific WashDOT questions, but we can get those documented and get responses to you as needed. So I've modified the presentation that we gave to the public about 2 weeks ago, and as we updated them on our design progress, and an outcome of that was that article in the in the Leader, and that was in your read ahead. So hopefully you've seen that, and we were really grateful to have that front page slot in the newspaper. So with that, I will start going. Maybe. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to give you some background about why and who, and then more about how and when later in the slideshow. So the first question I like to answer for folks is, why are we focused here? And really that's because we have entered into a federal state partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers to share the costs of estuary restoration in an area that the Army Corps has determined is nationally significant. Now that national significance is the Puget Sound area, generally all the inland waters of salt waters of Washington State, but I call that Puget Sound. I know Hood Canal is not technically Puget Sound to some people, but for my purposes, it is. So that's really important. It's a nationally significant area for aquatic ecosystem restoration. In the little bubbles, I populated the logos of our partners. So as I mentioned, the Army Corps and the Department of Fish and Wildlife have entered into a cost share arrangement to execute this project. We've also partnered with the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group and the Washington State Department of Transportation for this project. Certainly, those are not the only people providing input and being involved in the project. The other smaller bubbles just indicate all the variety of other folks at the county, the state, the federal partners, the tribes, the nonprofits, and others that have been engaged in this project over the years. So the next question is, why are we restoring estuaries? And the answer to that is, as we've analyzed the Puget Sound nearshore earlier on in the project, this project started in 2001. So we've been at this for 20 years, evaluating the problems and opportunities with the Puget Sound nearshore. We've determined that 55% of the historic tidal wetlands, so where tides and saltwaters, estuaries, where all of that stuff meets, have been lost since the late 1800s. So this little pie chart kind of represents the blue is the remaining acres and the gray are those lost acres. And I think if you think about some of those big river estuaries in Puget Sound, if you think about the Puyallup River in Tacoma, or you think about the Duwamish River in Seattle, like those estuaries are unrecognizable as estuaries in providing habitat. And what habitat do they provide? Well, these places where saltwater and freshwater meet provide habitat for fish, birds, shellfish, and wildlife. They contain a lot of important nutrients that support those fish and wildlife and the food web in general. They're a great place for naturally filtering out water pollutants to increase water quality. And they actually provide a good benefit for extreme events such as those king tides that we see, and also some resiliency to climate change. The vegetation that grows in these estuaries does that naturally for us. So when I look at the Duckabush Estuary, and I apologize, I assume that you all know where it is, but I should probably step back and just say we're on the west side of Hood Canal, part way up, just south of Brennan. So if that helps you all, apologies for not putting that in. When I look at the Duckabush Estuary, I see opportunity for improvement. This isn't a Puyallup estuary. This isn't a Duwamish estuary. This is the Duckabush, and it's not used by other land use needs like agriculture or a port or something like that. It really is pretty much in its original condition, with the exception of the highway that has been built across the estuary. So I've highlighted that here in red in case you couldn't see it. That's US 101, and it has 2 openings across the estuary to allow the river to come out. The project would address the highway and other features associated with the highway that have disconnected the river channels and alter the water and sediment movement within the estuary, that therefore has changed the way the habitat has developed here. And I've put some yellow circles to show, we've got some bridges that are locking the river in place. We've also got several places indicated by the blue lines that shows where channels have been completely disconnected by the installation of the highway. So that water and sediment is no longer flowing through the highway in those locations, or they've been put into culverts so small that they've significantly altered the way that that water and sediment can move through the estuary. We've done a little bit of poking around, and WashDOT has dug out some really great historical photos. And what these photos show is that that fill that was placed in the estuary that supports US 101 is really high. And you don't really notice this when you drive along 101 because you're driving on top of it. You don't really see what this is actually doing to the estuary, what it looks like from the estuary level. But there is a lot of fill, about 12 feet high. Maybe at this end, it looks like even higher than 12 feet high of fill placed in the estuary to support the roadbed. And here's another great historical photo. So this is what I call the flat bridge, and it's on the northern side of the estuary. You can see behind it, if I grab my laser pointer here, the old roadway is behind the existing in this photo, and you can see a little bit of Pierce's Resort, which was a historical settlement in the area, and some type of barn structure back here in the distance. None of these features, the road or the buildings, are in place today. But we do still have the current flat bridge and all of the fill and all of this. This is sackcrete. For those of you not familiar with that, it's bags of concrete. When it gets wet, it just hardens into like a armor bulkhead of sorts. So when we think about how to address the estuary and get it back to a more naturally functioning condition, a lot of people wonder what does that mean and how do we know what that looks like? And we use things called the historical T-sheets to help us understand what the conditions were before a lot of development was put in place. So this is from 1883. It's from the US Geodetic Survey, I believe. You can see the Pierce's Resort is already in the area, late 1800s, but there is no roadway documented across the estuary at this time. You can see where they put map channels and mudflats, salt marsh features. We also have some plans from the Department of Highways circa 1931 when they were about to install what is the current US 101 alignment. So the US 101 alignment is this line here. The old road that we can see in the historical photo is this alignment back here. And this gives a very detailed understanding of what the channels and the connectivity used to look like in the estuary before all of the fill and US 101 was installed. We've also done a considerable amount of work to collect data at this site. So that's what we've been doing since about mid to late 2019. So one of those things that we collected was Lidar Imagery, and it also gives us another good idea of where the current channels are, but also it gives you a peek into where those historic channels were. And one thing that's really obvious in this Lidar Imagery, if you can't see it, is the trapezoidal fill that supports US 101 going across the estuary. And that the river is confined to those two places to go out into Hood Canal. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on that Lidar imagery. And of course, as I zoom in, it gets a little blurry, so I apologize for that. In addition to the fill that the highway is on, there are these purple features that are kind of highlighted in purple. These are what I call training berms or levees to keep the river pointed underneath the bridge and out into Hood Canal. You'll notice that there are training levees on the main channel of the Deckbush River, but not on the north channel. The blue arrow here indicates kind of traditionally the volume of flow that goes through the channels. So historically, the main channel took most of the flow and the north channel had a lesser amount of flow, which is probably why we don't see those training berms on the north channel directing the flow under US 101. As we've analyzed this site over the last several years, we've noticed a few things. The first is that the north channel is actually taking on more of the flow than the south channel. And so I think you can very quickly see where this is going, is that with increased flow and under higher velocities, we're seeing that north bank of the north channel starting to erode more. And this is that sackcrete protection underneath the flat bridge. It's slumping in. You can see active erosion occurring on this bank of the north channel. Another thing we've noticed is that as the river is coming along here, it's taking a hard turn. It's hitting the end of this training berm and it's having to take a turn and it's pointing it into the other training berm. So if we take a look at some pictures, this is me standing on the end of that north berm, just looking at where the orange line goes. And you can see the river is actually off to the right. It's on the other side of the berm where we maybe don't want it to go in the long term. And then from the same kind of vantage point, looking over to the other levee, we are seeing levee erosion of that levee. So there are several things that we've observed as we're preparing for this project that make us realize that if this project isn't done, at some point in the future, there may be some problems that 101 experiences that WashDOT will have to address. I don't think any of these right now are current problems, but I think it's a sign of what could come if nothing happens at this particular location. So after all of that, the question is, so how do you fix this? How do you restore the estuary and better the habitat and improve the conditions for the fish and wildlife? So this is our preliminary schematic of what that looks like. And I'm sure you can read the legend and kind of follow along, but I'll point things out so you don't have to do that. The orange lined area is existing 101 and the red are the existing 101 bridges. All of that structure would come out. We would remove the fill, the roadway, everything. we would have to build a new highway, which is shown by the light gray. That's a new 1,600-foot elevated structure across the entirety of the estuary. And the main reason for doing this, if this were strictly habitat restoration, we would take out the existing road, restore the habitat, and it would be a great project for habitat. But we are savvy enough to know that you cannot disconnect 101 at the Duckbush Estuary. It has to be maintained. This is a very important transportation corridor for the Olympic Peninsula, for the state as a whole, and it must be maintained. So the project includes moving and elevating 101 onto a estuary spanning bridge. The blue lines indicate where channels would be reconnected. So these are those historic channels that we could see in the maps and in that Lidar imagery to reconnect the river to its floodplain and create more habitat for the fish and the wildlife, especially endangered salmon will benefit from a project such as this. And let's see, we've got 3 culverts that will be addressed in the project footprint, one up here in the bridge approach, one that's a little bit off screen. I had to chop it off to make this image big enough for you to see, but there's one down at the south. And then actually one here on County Road on Shorewood Road that will be addressed as part of the project. And then last of the major components is making sure that we have parking for the public to access the river and tidelands. This is DFW, mostly DFW owned property as part of our North Olympic Wildlife Area. So making sure there's parking for people to access on both sides of the bridge. The stars here just indicate of our partners who's responsible for which project elements. So this is a effort that the Army Corps and the Washington State Department of Transportation will be working on together. Project benefits, kind of going back to why are we doing this? We're improving the habitat for fish and wildlife. That's our primary objective, to restore the lost tidally influenced wetland areas. We improve water quality. There's a variety of ways this project is doing that, and I can talk about that later if people have questions. Reducing the backwater flooding, the highway that's in place now on fill. When there's a flooding event, it's basically like a bathtub with 2 small drains. So this project will remove that bathtub effect and allow the floodwaters to pass out quicker. And then, of course, this road was built in 1934. This would become a modernized highway design with meeting all of the current safety standards in place for roads, sight distances, earthquake standards, everything that WashDOT is required to address when they put in a new highway. All right, moving on to some great stuff now. So what does that look like for the highway piece? So this is a slide that I got from Bill Elliott at WashDOT, and the main components that we talked about, they will build a new bridge across the estuary. So that's this outlined in blue. The bridge will need new approaches, and because the new highway is slightly offset from the existing alignment, the approaches are going to have to start offsetting from existing 101. So you can see the project limits as marked by the pink here. So we've got approaches on both ends, the culverts in the approaches that will be addressed. And then Duckbush Road that currently comes in right about here will need to shift over to give the proper sight distance and safety for Duckbush Road to come into the new curvature of US 101. Moving along. So we have been lucky enough to partner with WashDOT's Visual Engineering Resources Group to give us some 3D imagery of what a post-project condition would look like. Keep in mind that this is still early level design. We're at about 30% design. So the final might look a little different than what we're seeing here, but this is what it looks like in general. You can see the elevated structure across the estuary. You can see the shifted Duckbush Road over here. There's a culvert here. The other one's off the screen, and there's another culvert up here. This is a profile view down at the bottom of your picture, just showing that like this is not on fill anymore. This is fully elevated over the estuary, and the water and sediment will be able to go wherever it chooses to go. This is an image of what the lane structure will look like, 12-foot lanes with 5-foot shoulders. This is an improvement over the existing conditions. Both of the bridges that are in place on 101 right now have no shoulders to accommodate bikes and a very narrow walkway on some of the bridge's sides to accommodate pedestrians. So this will be uniform now across the entire estuary. This image shows what it will look like, the old elevation versus the new. So the new structure will be slightly higher than the existing structure, but not considerably. So that I was worried initially that we'd have a giant structure in the estuary, but that is definitely not the case. And one of the great things we've been able to include that the community really valued, we learned in our public meetings, was being able to incorporate a left turn lane from northbound 101 onto County Decabush Road. So you can see what that visualization here. Excuse me. And with Decabush Road shifting over, we'll be able to create a parking lot out of what is the current Decabush Road area. All right, what do we have next? Excuse me. This is that same intersection, just showing that because US 101 will be higher, Decabush Road will need to become higher to meet with it. Bad time for me to have a cough. And it will be increased 8 feet up in the air at the intersection point. Sorry, guys. Too much talking, not enough water. All right, I'm gonna try and push through this and not cough too much in your ear. So, US 101, super important, cannot be taken offline, must maintain throughout construction. That is one of our planning constraints. So the contractor will use a work area between the existing 101 and the new 101, where they will stage their machinery and build the new bridge. And US 101 will remain open throughout that portion of the work. There will also be these roadway approaches that we discussed. There will be, for a period of time, some alternating one-way traffic with temporary signal control to accommodate this amount of work. And then lastly, there will be, I think, 2 nighttime closures for final tie-ins, but I will have to defer to WashDOT for what that is. But we have carefully planned this project to reduce the amount of impact to transportation as best as we could. So this is what it will look like once 101, the new bridge, is finished. The old one will still be in place until it is removed. So this is just a good overview of what the condition will look like for a while until the removal of the existing highway begins. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, this project benefits habitat. And one of the species that will benefit from this improved habitat are, actually 2 of the species are Endangered Species Act listed salmonids. So Hood Canal summer chum and mid-Hood Canal chinook. These guys are very dependent on the estuary for a portion of their life cycle. Things like water temperature, salinity, the size, shape, and volume, the complexity of the habitat, and the availability of prey is really important to them in an estuary. And the reason for that is pretty simple. These fish come out of the rivers really small, and they transition from freshwater to saltwater and go on their way. They need a place to stop and get big and to do that physiological transition so they can survive in the new saltwater conditions that are not like what they were born in the freshwater. So the more habitat, the better habitat, the more suitable that habitat is for them to rest, to eat, to hide from predators, allows them to get bigger and stronger and transition out into the saltwater as a fish that has a higher likelihood of surviving that and returning to the river to spawn. So estuaries are very important for fish, especially these ESA listed species. So this will be a huge help to these particular species. Also noting that elevating the structure over the estuary creates essentially a wildlife underpass. So the elk population that we've got in this area, any deer, bear, smaller wildlife, squirrels, raccoons, whatever it may be, they will now not have to cross over the highway to get from one side to the other. They will be able to cross under, and that will reduce the likelihood of vehicle wildlife interaction. intersections in this stretch of highway. Okay, I'm going to roll into schedule and funding really quickly here. I'm checking the time, it's tight. Okay, so design phase is approximately 3 years. We are here in the black bubble. We expect about a year more of design and be completed with design before the turn of the calendar year to 2023. We have full funding in hand to complete design. We are just pushing forward and getting that work done. There will be a period in which we need to secure the funding to proceed with construction, and then construction phase would be about 3 to 4 years in duration. We don't know yet when that will start. That will depend on when funding is secured and all of the lands for the project are secured. I said earlier at the presentation, this is a cost share with the Army Corps of Engineers. So when we partner with them under their Aquatic Ecosystem Restoration Program, they will be able to put about 40% of the funding into the project. And there are certain project elements that the Corps doesn't cost share. So in this particular project, the bridge, the new 101 bridge, is one of those elements that their policies do not allow them to cost share. So it puts a little bit more of the cost on the state side, which is indicated by the green. So that's roughly the breakout of how the federal versus the non-federal. And when I say non-federal, it's up to DFW to get that 60% of funding. When we break that out, DFW has about a $50 million need to complete this project. And about 93% of that $50 million is the new highway and bridge. And so that is our current problem statement that we are actively working. We have a state capital supplemental budget request in this year for that $50 million to complete this project. And on the federal side, the feds are also requesting their funding for the project, either through the infrastructure bill or their annual work planning process, whichever happens to materialize first. I guess this is really my last slide. My takeaway for this group is we need all the help we can get to fund the state portion, the $50 million ask for the construction phase of this project. It is a very large ask for a capital budget. You'll notice I say capital, not transportation. This is not a WashDOT project. It is not in their work plan. It's not a chronic environmental deficiency. This is an ecosystem restoration project, and it is being put forward by DFW into the capital budget. So just to summarize that, cost sharing it, federal responsibility is about 30 million, state about 50 million, and we're looking at the capital budget. We would appreciate any help or support we can get to help us get through the supplemental session successfully, and open to any ideas or thoughts you have about how to do that. So I will stop talking. I've talked a lot. Please ask questions, and I'm happy, or Seth and I are happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you very much, Teresa. It was very informative and very complete. Appreciate your presentation. Lindsay, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I had a question about those channels. It looks like they've been locked in place for about 90 years, and I would assume that they've incised and are probably below the overall height of the estuary floodplain. Is that the case? And if so, are there any parts of the project to try and reconnect them with the estuary floodplain?
So that's a really interesting question. I would say in general, we're not seeing incision of the channels, and that's just because of the amount of sediment coming down the river. So historically, before the highway was put in place, as the river flows and floods, that sediment kind of spreads out and can go wherever. Now it's being confined to the two channels. So we're actually seeing, and the reason why the flow is going more northerly now is we're seeing a lot of sedimentation and rising of the elevation of the channel. So I think it's almost opposite in most places of what I think I heard you say. The channel excavation work that is happening, and let me see if I can get to a slide that might show that a little better. This image, you can't see it because of the tidal elevation we projected, but there is a channel here. Let me switch to pen. So we're connecting this channel here, this channel here, this channel here, and this channel here. There was an idea to also connect this, but through our evaluation over the last couple of years, realizing that that north channel, that connector is doing fine on its own. So that will not be part of the project anymore. So I don't know, to answer your question, maybe more concisely, most of the excavation will be just through these areas where the existing 101 is and making sure we're connected. And then to keep our footprint out of the estuary as much as possible, not really getting out there and digging anything to any specific elevation beyond what we're doing in the 101 footprint.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Raise your hand or speak. Please.
Is there any opportunity with residual funding? I know that's a funny word, to support fishermen or other local population at the base of the bridge for access at this point to fishing, for example?
One of the discussions that's being had now that we're past kind of at that 30-35% design milestone is including a hand boat launch in the area somewhere, but there wouldn't be a any kind of boat launch paved or any structure like that. But to the extent that we can accommodate hand boat launching, that seems at this point likely. I don't want to promise it because we're not at that point in design.
Thank you, Kate, and then Wendy.
Great. Hi, Teresa. Nice to see you. It's really exciting to see the work that's been done since we were last briefed on this. This project is, probably one of the largest projects that we'll see in Jefferson County and have seen for some time. I actually first heard about it in Washington, D.C. I think you were maybe even there, Teresa. And I said, what? You talking about my Jefferson County? And I think what struck me most was that I did not realize so much work went into identifying this estuary as highly productive. And there had been a pretty extensive analysis of estuaries to identify some of the most critical, most pristine, highest impact of preserving them. And I was surprised that I was years into this position and across the country when I learned that. And it gave me such a new appreciation for this project. So I just wanted to insert that because it was a real aha moment for me.
Thank you. Wendy?
Hi, Teresa. It's good to see you again. Yeah, I wanted to follow up with you that one of the wildlife habitat issues is water quality. And do you have any more information about how this project is improving water quality for the aquaculture industry?
So yeah, making sure I have my mute off. Okay, yes, so water quality is definitely something that we expect will benefit as a result of this project. The primary reason for that, I'm gonna keep my pen, is that the current 101 has no water treatment on it. So anything on the road just washes into the estuary. The new structure will have collect water on it, and there will be a water treatment bioswale here and a water treatment bioswale here. So one on each end of the bridge. Bridge will have a high point kind of in the center. Water will run off each side in their collection and go into the bioswales in these locations. Couple other things just naturally, as we talked about functional estuaries and the vegetation and allowing the water to spread out, again, naturally filters some of the pollutants out of the water. So increasing that connectivity and the area that the water can go will help in that regard. And then there is some level of expectation that by reducing the backwater flooding effect that is experienced here, that fewer septic drain fields would be inundated or for not as long. And so to the extent that any of, leaky septic systems are inputting into the water, that would be reduced or the duration shortened anyway, that might help with some of that water quality issue as well. So there's a couple different ways that we're tracking that water quality is expected to improve as a result of this project.
Well, thanks for your thorough answer. That's very cool.
Yes, thank you. Sarah?
Yeah, earlier in the meeting, we talked just real briefly about resilience. And so this is for Teresa. One of my thoughts was that on your slide where you have about the project benefits, if you could fit another bullet, you clearly, like you could see through the work that you all have done that this was going in time, this was going to erode 101. And by elevating it and getting it up and removing that, I think resilience is definitely a function of this, increasing the resilience of the 101 corridor. And with the emphasis, like Secretary Buttigieg just released within the last few days, the climate action plan for US DOT. And I know that capital funding is more than just transportation, but certainly on the transportation side, resilience is a huge emphasis of the stuff that of the funding that's going to be released soon. So, and then just to the policymakers, this is a great example of how fixing a problem, like this, the estuary problem actually has long-term benefit for 101 and the resilience of that corridor. So just these are small little ways that we'll start thinking about resilience differently in the future. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? I know I very much appreciated the presentation. It was very thorough, very articulate. Teresa, you did an exceptional job, so thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay. Appreciate that. Moving on down our agenda, I believe a report from Thera is, oh, just a second, Steve Gray has something to say. Let's hear from Steve.
Hi, great presentation, Teresa. Sounded like part of what Teresa was asking in Fish and Wildlife was how can the PRTPO help? I'm just throwing this out here. I'm not sure if it's appropriate this time or not, but could we consider adding the Ducklefish Estuary Restoration Project to our legislative folio as one of the projects for the region?
I know that I'm not opposed to that, but again, she was asking for capital money, and our list is basically transportation asks. But we could, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the bullet point earlier that Commissioner Dean suggested on resiliency, we could rephrase that particular bullet point and bring the Duckabush in there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and as for putting it on the actual specifics on the actual paperwork there, it should go through a process.
Yeah. With that said, with Randy saying it needs to go through a process, we have everyone here. Is there an agreement to strengthen our resiliency statement by adding the Duckabush project to that statement?
I think my question is, should it be going through the TAC?
Okay. What I'm seeing are thumbs up from our board members saying that we could add it to the resiliency. So does anyone else want to address whether this needs to go through the TAC or not? Because the TAC doesn't meet again until, Kate, I'll let you speak.
Thank you. And Teresa and I chatted a little bit offline about this very topic, and I had the same feeling that it could be added as an example, like the SR3 Gorst intersection is used as an example in one of our bullet points there. And I was wondering if that went through the TAC also, because I know typically we don't call out specific projects as legislative priorities. But I thought it was a good idea to use this as an example of a project that has multiple benefits, environmental benefits, including resiliency, as you mentioned.
Beck, do you want us to meet at SOTAC, but knowing that the board has agreed that this fits the definition of resiliency?
Sometimes I just go right to the logistics of things, and I don't see a need personally to call a separate TAC meeting. And TAC does not meet again until November. And if we're wanting to move this forward, how does that delay affect us in our other scheduling and other things? Because once it gets to the TAC, that still doesn't give it board approval. So we still need approval from the board. And so then we're looking till December. So my personal preference is, if we're using it as an example, it seems to me we should be able to take it to our policy board and not necessarily have to take it through the TAC.
And Beck, I would agree if it's used as an example, but I just want to remind everybody, if it's capital requests, there's only so many capital dollars. There's projects that are on there from all over the region. You want to make sure that it doesn't come in conflict with the need of that dollar.
Right, and those are right. Those are the transportation list is totally separate in my mind than using the Duckabush restoration project as an example of a resiliency project. And again, that is a capital ask. So again, I'll put it out to the group. If you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down to use it in our resiliency statement, just as an example. Okay, I'm getting quite a few thumbs up. So with that, I'm comfortable adding it to the resiliency paragraph, and we would be glad to send that revised paragraph out to everyone before we actually publish the outline. Does that make sense, Sarah? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. We want to make sure we meet everyone's needs, but we also have time issues, and we only meet every other month. Our TAC only meets every other month. So really glad that we can be nimble in recognizing the importance of this and including it. So with that, Sarah, we will go down to your report.
Sorry about that. Coordinators report. We've had a few meetings since you met last. Ed and I continue to work with the team to build some GIS tools, and as Ed said, he thinks maybe by December he'll have something to show you, and it's also going to help us with some great outreach tools to use for the Human Services Transportation Plan update. You see links in your coordinators report to 2 administrative reports that we completed. We don't bring them to you. They're very administrative. That's why they don't really sort of show up as briefings on your agenda. But if any of you want to know more about either the UPWP annual report or the Title VI annual report, if you have any questions or want to talk about it, please follow up with me. I'd be happy to go into it in any detail with you. The big shout out to all of our TAP project recipients. Everybody got their project phases obligated by August 1st by the deadline, so there was no risk of project sanctioning there. Again, it's a huge effort that local agencies go through to get these projects obligated, and we really appreciate all the work that you did and putting up with Ed and me bugging you all this, to make sure everything was going okay. For US bike route designation, the TAC just sort of recommended that in the future, if a local agency wants to pursue it, reach out to PRTPO. It really is a local agency thing. Some agencies may want to do this in the future, as they talked about, but the timing isn't right now. There's still some ongoing correspondence on the side that we're tracking just to keep it in case we ever need it again in the future, but that we don't see that coming back to you until such time as that. You see information attached to the coordinator's report about 2 state broadband implementation grants. The one implementation grant is due very soon, but there's going to be a second call for projects this April. And so even if your organization is not thinking about applying now, but might be thinking about applying this spring, I attached some of the information, the materials for that to the coordinator's report. It could be worth taking a look at to see the kinds of information that they're going to ask for in the spring. So if you want to route that to whoever on your staff would handle that, this would be sort of a heads up as to what might be coming if you're thinking about going for this again in 6 months. And then Washington, the State Recreation and Conservation Plan update is underway. And when I wrote this, I knew that it was coming, but yesterday they launched their public survey on the use of outdoor facilities. And I bring this up because sometimes we don't think about it, but RCO has funded significant parts of the development of the Olympic Discovery Trail. So surveys like this inform the updates of their plan, which then inform their future grant efforts. So it's worth filling out the grant and sending it around. I put a link to it on the homepage of PRTPO's website, so you can access it easily from there. And then the other thing I'll tell you about that I'm kind of excited about, I took a look at the questions, the survey questions, and there are a lot of good transportation questions in there about how people access recreational opportunities by mode, how long they spend getting there, how important is things like parking, EV charging, things like that. Are they looking to do active transportation like biking when they get to their recreational destination? So I contacted the survey folks at RCO, and they're going to, when the survey closes on November 15th, they're going to share their data with us for residents. This is a residence-based survey, and they're collecting data by both county and zip code. So we'll be able to get data that was submitted by residents within the Peninsula region to understand better how the kind of barriers, accessibility, multimodal access, things that they would like to have, and how to access outdoor recreation in the Peninsula region. So this is one of those things where we'll happily take somebody else's data and use it for our own purposes here. They will be having another survey coming out soon for owners and operators of recreational facilities. So for those of you who own parts of the Olympic Discovery Trail or other bike trails, facilities, recreational things, they will have a survey for you shortly, and we'll again help get that word out. And then the last thing I would share with you is just a reminder. I mentioned it in the EV workshop. This doesn't show up on the coordinator's report, but we are hosting that workshop for those interested in hearing from charging companies about how to work with them, how to put proposals together. And hopefully by then, speaking to the earlier topic, I'll have some more information from somebody like Energy Northwest, or these, they probably would not use this term themselves, but I think of them as sort of like a consolidator for how to pull these big multi-partner projects together. So it could be an interesting workshop, and feel free to shoot me a email or whatever if you have more questions on that. And then the last thing I'll bring up, and it's sort of related to this, but not, and thank you, David, for pointing this out. It looks like at least one person, Kate, had problems logging in today. There have been lots of system updates for Zoom. And I'll also say, just on my own end, on security updates on the computer. So if any of you had difficulty logging into the meeting today, I apologize, and maybe we can follow up separately offline to figure out whether it was a problem with a link in the agenda or the calendar appointment. These links have been out there so long, and there have been so many system updates. If you all are having problems with them, I want to know about that and deal with that. So that's the end of my report. Happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you, Thera. And I believe that you committed to sending information on that meeting on that
To everybody, that's right.
26th to everyone.
I will. I will send all of you the meeting invitation. Thank you for reminding me that. Yes.
Yeah, just put that on your list of things to do.
It was, and I forgot it. So, but it's right there.
Anyway, we want to make sure that if anyone from any of our ports want to come, or any of our jurisdictions want to come, sometimes those things get lost. So a second reminder would be very good. We are moving along in our agenda quite well. And before we enter the public comment period, I had one other just item that has been presented to the RPTO, just so that everyone's aware of it. But we received a data sharing agreement this week from the state auditor's office. And they had they were suggesting it be executed by October 22nd. That did not give our executive committee or our board an opportunity to really do our due diligence on this particular agreement. So we contacted the state auditor's office and found out that that was not a hard date. And we let them know that we would do our due diligence on this particular document and get back with them as expeditiously as we could, but that we were not prepared to execute it by the 22nd. There are, just to give you, our board, a little background, I, as coming from a for-profit background with a closely held company, I had a real knee jerk on this one. I didn't think that it met the needs of the RPTO. I thought it was fairly generic. Anyway, there were just some issues with it. And so we will be doing more due diligence on that. And I am willing definitely to soften my position on it, but not until it's been thoroughly explored. So we will be bringing that back to you in December. And again, with most of our things, we would review it with you in December and take action in February. So we let the state auditor's office know that that would be our timeline. With that, this is an open public meeting. Is there anyone in our audience, public in our audience, who would like to make public comment at this time? Okay, I'll ask again if there's anyone who wanted to provide public comment to the RPTO this morning. Seeing none, we will move on down to member updates. Is there anything anyone wants to share about what's happening with your jurisdiction? Okay, Steve, thank you. Go ahead. It's that mute thing again, Steve.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So happy to report that Collin County will have its first roundabout being constructed here soon in unincorporated Collin County. It'll be just north of the city of Sequim urban growth area on Sequim Dungeness Way, and there is a roundabout already in the city further to the south of this one. Be 160-foot diameter roundabout, and almost fully funded by federal safety and STP money.
There, and then I didn't unmute. Thank you, Steve. That's excellent news. Steve or Ed, do you have something?
So I would invite Steve and any of the others who want to see what a roundabout on a major state route thoroughfare looks like to come just outside of Paulsville on the way to the Bainbridge Island Ferry. We are about halfway through, maybe a little more. That's about $8 million. And it's got a great radical pedestrian multimodal solution, which is a tunnel underneath the roundabout. So that's worth viewing too. If you really want to look at it from more than the window of your car, our engineering department at the city of Paulsville, glad to tour you through it. But there'll be, how many, Beck? two others before the bridge, and then on Bainbridge Island, anywhere from 1 to 3 in the future, but this is the model right now.
Yeah, and I think you just volunteered Michael Bateman to take people on tours.
I hope I did, because he volunteered me onto the PRTPO.
Yeah, we're definitely happy to show off our project. We're pretty proud of it, and it has been a big deal for us to make it happen. It's a long time coming.
Thank you. It is, and that 305 corridor is an important route for everyone. Is there anyone else who wants to share what's going on with their jurisdiction? Okay, Lindsay, there you go. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Hey, I just dropped in the chat a direct link to Clallam Transit's comprehensive operational analysis, which I think we've probably told PRTPO about before, but I don't think the link to it's been available. So I apologize if I'm late there, but I think it's really exciting. We're looking at replacing the kind of Pac-Man-like shuttle services in Squim and Forks with microtransit. So kind of like on-demand dial-a-ride, but kind of what you usually see by private practices now. And I think Kitsap already does this on Bainbridge Island. So we are not the leaders there, but looking at that for Squim and Forks. And then looking at more crosstown routes in Port Angeles. We did recently start a midday straight shot run to the Bainbridge Island ferry from Port Angeles, and then 2 runs on Sunday. And then in the city of Port Angeles, just connecting some of the themes that we've talked about in this meeting, we did just get some preliminary greenhouse gas emission inventory results for not just the city as a municipality, but also for the whole community. And about 68% of our greenhouse gas emissions in the city of Port Angeles area are from on-road transportation and mobile sources. So, that's significantly more as a percentage than most communities where, buildings and electricity use, usually constitutes quite a bit. City of Port Angeles doesn't have a municipal natural gas. There was an explosion in the 20th century, and that kind of canned that utility for better than worse now, I guess. But so that what we're talking about here is very relevant for us as a community to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And since it's a multi-jurisdictional meeting that we have here, I think we should look at doing a bit of a competition of like a per capita greenhouse gas emission ranking, and maybe every year or so, let's compare different communities or different counties, and see if we can kind of non-competitively compete with each other to figure out who's doing their part to reduce our impact. Thank you.
That sounds great. And I will say Kitsap Transit, not only, as you mentioned, on Bainbridge Island, but they have a dial-a-ride program in West Port Orchard that is much more efficient than trying to provide regular transit routes out there. So congratulations to Clallam Transit to make their system more efficient. The other question I had that I didn't ask during that Deca Bush, do we have any transit routes that go up that side of 101? Does Mason Transit meet with Jefferson Transit over there?
Yes, we do.
Yes. Okay, so there will be an impact during this construction to your mobility on that side.
Yes, we'll plan around it.
Okay, thank you. I just thought of it at the time. So anything else anyone would like to share? Okay, with that, I would be happy to give you back 10 minutes of your day and adjourn our meeting unless there's anything else for the good of the order. Okay, seeing none, we stand adjourned. Thank you, and we will see everybody in December.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.